Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And today's range report is definitely on something that looks kind of weird. In fact, some people jokingly refer to this firearm as the Tactical Tuna. Today we're going to be taking a look at the FN FS2000. Now this version is the tactical version, which means it has a rail on the top. The original versions had a built-in optic, but this one has been modernized. The FS2000 is a semi-auto version of the F2000, which of course is a full-auto assault rifle, but this one is just semi-automatic, made in Belgium. And it has a few features that I find to be very fascinating and interesting that you don't find on any other firearm, and we're going to talk about those. Now obviously this gun is a bullpup, and I should probably start this video off by saying I am not a fan of bullpups, but I'll talk about why. I think they're a really cool concept, but in general I've always thought of them as an answer in search of a problem. But before we talk about that and all the things about this gun that I like and don't like, as always I want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this really weird looking rifle. He's a local fan and subscriber. His name is Jack. In fact, he's the second person named Jack that lends guns to the channel, so we're going to call him Jack number 2. Thank you again, Jack, for lending such a cool rifle for me to review. As always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters, because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here. I couldn't do it without them. And if you guys want to join my Patreon, you can do it for as little as $1 a month and get to see all of these videos early. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor for all of my range reports, because he provides the ammunition, thus making them financially feasible for me to make, and that is my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And I know this is not your typical rifle. It's a lot of polymer. There's no wood on this at all. But most likely, if you like guns like this, you probably like traditional guns as well, and high quality traditional guns like 1911s, Beretta 92s, CZ75s, or Browning high powers, just to name a few. And you've been thinking to yourself, it'd be awesome if I had a custom set of wood grips, maybe something with a custom logo or a custom engraving. Well, I have the perfect company for you, and that is Brownworks. Mark over there, who's the owner of Brownworks, he's an artist, he's a craftsman. He's always coming up with new and innovative products. He can make laminate woods, make grips out of exotic woods and materials. He can even apply things like snakeskin and alligator skins to the grips to give them a unique texture. And if you have a custom logo or a custom engraving, he can do that as well. So I'm going to ask you guys to go check out his website. I'm going to put a link in the comments section below. Go over there and see what he has to offer. And if you don't find what you're looking for, I can guarantee you he can make it for you. So make sure you contact Mark and tell him specifically what you are looking for. And when you do, please tell him the Texas Gun Vault sent you. All right, so let's talk about this rifle and what it is all about. Once again, we are reviewing the FS2000, which is a semi-automatic version of the F2000. It is a bullpup rifle. This thing was introduced in 2001 as some of the new guns in the FN lineup. It shares a lot of the ergonomics and kind of the lower receiver with the P90 and the PS90, which is their submachine gun in 5.7, which is still very, very popular. But this one is chambered in 5.56. Very interesting rifle. So let's go ahead and talk about the things that I like and don't like about this gun. And I always want to start with the positive first. And the first thing I really like about this gun is the thing that I think a lot of people don't like about it, in that it is so different. I might not like how it's different, but I like the fact that FN was thinking out of the box. I always complain that I think new gun designs are kind of stale. And I like it when gun companies try something different. Now, they may fail, it may be a bad idea in the end, but at least they're trying something new. And sometimes those new concepts really catch on. But I don't think this one did, but I like the fact it is something completely different. If you own one of these, trust me, you got nothing else in your gun safe that looks and functions like this. And that is really something kind of cool. Now, I did mention that I don't like bullpups, and I'll explain why in a minute. But one of the reasons that I don't like bullpups is the trigger. However, when I have pulled the trigger on this here in the garage, I'm actually kind of impressed with it. It's still nowhere as nice as even a mil-spec AR-15 trigger, but most of the time when it comes to a bullpup trigger, they're horrible. This one actually is okay. And the reason that the triggers, I think, always suck is you have the trigger up here at the front and the action in the back. And you always have to have some type of linkage which connects up here to back here. And all that extra mechanics just makes the trigger feel gritty, it feels long, it makes it feel unpredictable, and in general, I don't like them. This trigger kind of seems a little bit heavy, but it's actually not too bad. So I actually kind of like the trigger for what it is. Another weird feature about this rifle that I do like, and some people make fun of, is because it is a bullpup, you can't see into that chamber very well, but they provide you with this little door in the back that flips up, and some people jokingly refer to this as the toilet seat, and you can see why. Yeah, it's kind of goofy looking. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but it allows you to look into the action of the gun. And you can even charge the gun this way, and you can see if there's a round in the chamber. And I like to use this from time to time because you'll also notice that you don't have an ejection port on either side. And no, it does not eject on the bottom. It actually ejects in a really weird place at the front of the gun. In fact, we have a little door right here, and this is your dust cover up here. Let's see if I can flip it up. Here we go. There it is. But that is your dust cover right there, and it ejects to the front. So when you're seeing me shoot this gun, you're gonna see the rounds dribble out the front. It's kind of weird, and if you're not used to it, it's kind of weird to see when you're shooting because you don't really hear and feel the ejections coming out the side, and it's just dribbling out the front. But this is an interesting design, and I think the whole point of this was to keep all of the debris and the particulate out of this gun, and that also gives us some problems that we're going to talk about in the things that I don't like. But speaking about the things that I don't like, let's talk about those now. And the first thing I don't like is the magazines. Now, this does use a standard Stanag magazine, but you'll notice it's hard to get out. I was talking about how this gun was kind of sealed to prevent particulate and stuff from getting inside. And so even using the FN branded magazine that comes with this gun, this is really hard to insert and to get out, but it's designed that way on purpose. Now, I'm just used to AR-15s, and I like it when I push the magazine release button for that mag to simply just drop out, and you can't do it with this gun. So I actually think changing out the magazine is actually going to be kind of difficult at the range if you're trying to do it fast. I also think if these magazines are loaded to capacity, it might be really hard to get them inserted and to charge the weapon and have the bolt pick off that first round in the magazine. But we're just going to have to see. Now, the big thing about this gun that I don't like, once again, is that it is a bullpup. And the reason I don't like bullpups is I am not a big fan of having my face right up against where the chamber is. Now, I know that when it comes to catastrophic failures in modern guns, they are kind of rare, but we've all seen the pictures of the banana-peeled barrels of guns literally blowing up because a round wasn't properly chambered, or maybe it was overpressured. And I want to get my face away from that. So even when you're shooting an AR-15, it's dangerous if you have a catastrophic malfunction and the receiver is 7 or 8 inches away from your face. I'm not a big fan of having my face right here on this stock right next to that chamber, just in case something happens. I just don't like it. Another thing about a bullpup is you don't really get much when it comes to adjustments on the stock. So if this stock does not fit you, well, you're kind of out of luck. If you want a longer length of pull, you're not getting it. You want a shorter length of pull? Nope. If you want the cheek riser? Nope. You can't do anything on this. It is just the way it is. And I don't like that because I know that when it comes to fielding a weapon in the military, you're probably going to have guys that are short, guys that are tall, guys that are big, guys that are small. And this rifle is designed to fit all of them, and I just don't think that's going to be the case. And just kind of putting it against my shoulder here on the workbench, I don't like the overall length of pull, and also how far my head has to come over the stock to see the iron sights. And the iron sights are actually another thing that I don't like. And I know some people are going to say this gun is designed to be run with an optic, but I'm going to review it as it came to me with just the iron sights. And that little iron sight in the back is really, really tiny. Yeah, that thing kind of sucks in my opinion. It's kind of short, and why, when I'm trying to use it, I have a hard time seeing through that thing. Now, I got pretty good eyesight, but that thing is really tiny. I really feel like AR-15 iron sights and the mil-spec ones are just kind of the gold standard when it comes to the way iron sights should be on rifles like this. Another interesting feature about this gun that I don't like is that it doesn't have a last round bolt hold open. So if you're shooting, the bolt is not going to lock back like in pretty much every other modern rifle. It's going to be like an HK MP5 or a G3. You're just going to get a click. And then if you want to charge the weapon again, you got to pull the charging handle back after you reinsert the new magazine. I think it slows everything down. I have no idea why there is no last round bolt hold open on this, especially when magazines are going to be so hard to insert. I really feel like that is something that they should have addressed. Why they left it off, I have no idea. I'm sure there's some reason out there, but from someone that shoots AR-15s all the time and modern rifles, how can you have a semi-automatic or a fully automatic rifle that doesn't have a last round bolt hold open in 2024? The last thing about this rifle that I don't like is how bulky it is. In fact, if you go online to the Wikipedia page about this gun, you're going to see it with all the different accessories that can come with it. And it's just massive. It's just a bulky rifle. It's not heavy. It's just big. And I kind of think it's a little bit unwieldy. It's kind of weird to maneuver around with. I guess they were trying to think of the ergonomics when it comes to this forend, but for me, that is just a big old piece of plastic. And it's not that it's just big, it's just bulky. It's thick, it's wide. Yeah, for me, it's just weird. And I just don't like that. I kind of feel like they could have accomplished the same thing with a lot less polymer and made it look a little bit better, which would have made it, I think, a more adaptable weapons platform for more people that are used to more traditional modern sporting rifles. Now, the one thing I want to show you though, before we do go to the range, is this trigger pull. I talked about how bullpups typically have bad triggers, but this one is okay. So before going to the range, I want to adjust the camera and I want to get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge and actually see what this trigger is pulling at. So let me go ahead and adjust the camera and let's do that now. Alright, so I mentioned that the trigger in this firearm is kind of heavy, but for a bullpup, it's okay. So let's test it out. We got the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge out. Let's drop the magazine, and that thing is in there nice and tight. Ensure that there is no ammunition in it. Set that aside. Now, in order to safety check the firearm, we got to open up the toilet seat, look into the toilet bowl there, and let's pull the charging handle back, and it looks like we are good. The chamber is empty. Let's close that up. And then let's get out the gauge, let's clear the averages, and let's test this thing out. And this is kind of awkward to do because of the shape of the gun. All right, so our first pull is 8 pounds, 0.2 ounces. Eight pounds, 0.8 ounces. Eight pounds, 3.7 ounces. 8 pounds, 2.4 ounces. And finally, 8 pounds, 2.2 ounces, and that's a pretty darn consistent trigger pull, which gives us an average of 8 pounds, 1.9 ounces. So it's definitely a pretty darn heavy trigger for a modern sporting rifle, but it's not so bad. I've actually had worse triggers in guns like the Steyr AUG, but that's what it pulls at. I think the trigger is kind of predictable, but it's just heavy. All right, so now let's get this gun to the range. As always, I'm going to set the target at 10 yards when it comes to reviewing rifles. I'm going to put one magazine through this gun and just experience what this gun is all about with my first shots. And then I'll come back and tell you if there's anything about this gun that I discovered that I like or don't like that I couldn't find out here on the workbench. So let's go to the range. And that was a very eye-opening and enlightening experience. And a few things about this gun really stick out as being uncomfortable. I already kind of mentioned one. I noticed that when I have to look through the iron sights, my head really has to tilt over the stock a lot more than I typically have to on other rifles. The gun also seems to recoil a little bit more than your standard AR-15. So I'm not really sure when it comes to the mechanics and the internal mechanisms in here, does that cause that? It's not bad, and because the gun is so compact, I feel like I can keep the gun on target, but I feel like a lot more recoil is coming into my shoulder than your typical AR. So I'm not really sure what type of buffer system they have in this. I also think that the length of pull in this is actually too short for me. And so if you're a taller guy, and by the way, I am 6 foot tall, so if you're my height or taller, this might be a little bit too short for you, and I wish I had a little bit more length on this. And of course, this rear sight is really, really tiny. It's honestly too tiny. I kind of wish it had something very similar to like an AR-15 where you have the larger and the smaller aperture. However, when it comes to the general accuracy of this gun, I'm actually pretty darn impressed. So for looking through this little tiny sight in the back, I'm pretty happy with that first magazine. All right, so let's now double the distance of this target. Let's go out to about 20 yards or so. Let's put another magazine through this. I'm gonna go for the head on this IDPA target, and I'm hoping that with these sights, I'll still be able to put rounds on target pretty accurately. So let's see how I do. And so you'll notice I encountered a very odd problem when I tried to charge the weapon. There were still some casings in the tube taking them from the chamber to be ejected. And because they were in there, the gun actually didn't want to go into battery until those were cleared. So obviously that's part of the mechanism. So if you're done shooting and you're loading a new magazine into the gun, you better be sure that either that bolt is going to slam home or there are no casings in the gun. It makes me kind of wonder about how you would clear a malfunction, and if anything can get in there to stop those casings from coming out, because you don't have access with an ejection port. You can't get into the internals of this gun very well at all. So what happens if you had certain different types of malfunctions like failures to feed or failures to extract? Would that take this gun out of commission? I'm not really sure, because I don't know how to clear a malfunction like that in a gun that is so enclosed. Something else I noticed is this gun is kind of loud to your ear. When your head is right up next to this stock, you hear all of the springs and the mechanisms back here. And that's just another byproduct of this being a bullpup rifle. So it's kind of loud. You know how when you shoot an AR-15 you can hear that action spring? Well, this is something even more. I hear a lot of like pinging and spring sounds, and I don't really like that at all, but I still am pleasantly surprised with the accuracy of this gun. With this heavier trigger and these really tiny sights, I'm actually doing pretty darn good. So far, it is exceeding my expectations in some ways. All right, so the next test I want to do is the bench rest test. And this is actually going to be kind of challenging because this isn't like your standard rifle. There's not much out here to put on the bench or some type of rest. So I'm going to put this up against my bag. Hopefully I'll be able to do it. I'm going to set up the target at as far as I can at this indoor range. And yes, it is only 25 yards, and I know this is a rifle. However, this is kind of designed as a CQB weapon. So I think at 25 yards, that's pretty much going to be fine for me. I know this thing can go out to much further distances, but this is just the range I have access to, and without having an optic on it and just running iron sights, if I can put rounds on target in a tight group, I'd be pretty happy. So here we go, as far out as I can shoot at this range, bench resting, and let's see how this rifle groups. And you know, for not being able to see where those rounds are impacting the target, I'm actually pretty darn impressed with this thing. However, it's not very ergonomic to shoot from a bench. Now, I don't know how this rifle could ever be used as a DMR. One of the advantages of a gun like an AR-15 is that you can have a short carbine for a CQB weapon. You can also have a longer barreled version for DMR use. This gun, I don't know if you really could. It's designed to be such a compact weapon. Now, I'm sure there's probably probably versions of this out there with a much longer barrel and maybe a bipod and the like, but I just don't see how that would work, especially if you're shooting from a prone position. So I don't know how they really expect soldiers in the field to use this. Now, as I said, I'm not a professional shooter, I'm not a soldier, so there's probably a way to do it. But even with this magazine hanging down, I don't know if you're going to shoot this from a prone position very well and be very accurate. I find it to be very uncomfortable just shooting it from the bench. All right, so the next test I want to do is the quick magazine change. Now, I've already told you how tight this is in the gun. I really have to pull on this kind of hard. Now, something else that I am noticing when I'm loading the weapon is if this magazine does not go all the way in, it's not going to strip off the first round in the magazine. And sometimes I think the magazine is all the way in, and it's actually not. And you'll notice that in all of this footage, I am slamming this magazine up as far as I can, making sure it is locked in. So because this does not have a last round bolt hold open, the magazine is really tight. I don't really think I'm going to be too successful with this, but we're going to find out. So here we go, the quick magazine change test, and see how fast I can shoot this gun and get a new fresh magazine in it and get it back in action. All right, and so I'm having some major issues with this. In fact, some of the things that I have left out of this range report and the footage from the range is sometimes I would put a magazine in, I would tap it in, I would charge the weapon, and the magazine actually wasn't all the way in. And I was curious if I was going to shoot this thing fast, and I don't have a lot of time to make sure it's set, would I have an issue? And yes, I definitely did. And so that is a big disappointment. I don't know why they designed it that way. I know people will say it is to keep particulate and debris from getting into the action, but do we really have that much trouble when it comes to AR-15s? I can exchange the magazine out on an AR-15 with absolutely no problem, and I know that magazine is set and when it's inserted into the gun. This gun makes me think the magazine is all the way in there, but it's actually not. Man, I don't know if I would want to be a soldier in the field having to carry one of these because I don't have the confidence with that. Now, I know maybe if this was the only gun that I trained with, it would be fine. But I'm coming from the world of AR-15s and SIG MCXs and so forth, and even AK-47s. I know with an AK-47 when that magazine is rocked and locked in that receiver. Well, I'm thinking this thing is all the way in. I feel a click, but obviously it's not in. So I don't like that about this gun at all. And there's no reason why this magazine is so hard to get in and out. All right, so the last thing I want to do is the mag dump test. Now, obviously this gun was originally designed to be a fully automatic fire, but this is only semi-automatic. But hopefully this is not going to have a lot of recoil. I already know it kind of does, but hopefully when I'm shooting it fast, I'll be able to keep all the rounds on target. So here we go. Let me load up one more magazine, shoot this thing as fast as I possibly can, get the results, and then I'll give you guys my final thoughts. And I have to say, this gun seems to be a little bit harder to keep on target when you're shooting fast. When I was shooting it slow, I had no issues at all, and this gun was really accurate. But maybe it's pulling this heavier trigger back kind of fast, but I actually think it's because the gun is so compact. One of the more modern shooting techniques with guns like AR-15s is to take your support hand and put it out as far as you possibly can with the C-clamp. Therefore, you have 2 points holding the rifle very far apart, and that gives you a lot of control. But because this whole body of this gun is so compact, you really can't do that. So you don't get that control of the front of the gun. Now, I know this is designed, as I said, as a fully automatic weapon. And I don't know, maybe if I fired it in full auto, I wouldn't have the same issue. But in semi-auto with the heavier trigger, it's just not as accurate shooting this thing fast as I would want it to be. Now, shooting it slow, it was great and exceeded my expectations. But shooting this thing fast, probably not. So if I was going to use this in a carbine competition, well, I really wouldn't want to use it in a carbine competition. Give me a Colt 6920 any day of the week. So what are my final thoughts on the FN FS2000, the tactical tuna? This thing is weird. Yeah, weirdly shaped. It's bulky. It's big. Well, it is really accurate when it comes to slow shooting. That really surprised me. And the trigger in general is better than I thought it would be for a bullpup. But the ergonomics are weird, and honestly, how tight the magazine is in this receiver is just a no-go for me. It needs a last round bolt hold open. Yeah, it's just not the gun for me, and I don't like it because it's a bullpup, and I still am a little bit weary shooting bullpups, having my head so close to the action of this gun just in case it goes boom. I just don't want my head here. I would rather it hurt my hands or maybe even my wrists, but not my face. I want my face away from the explosion. But that's just my personal thoughts. I know these things are fielded by militaries around the world, but I don't know. That's just my personal thoughts on it. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating the problem, but that's just the way that I think about it. So, on my star system, what would I give the FN FS2000? Well, this might disappoint some of you FN fans. I'm only going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. The gun ran fine. I had no failures whatsoever with the exception of that magazine insertion. But when it comes to the function of the gun, the loading, the unloading, when it comes to having any failures to feeds or failures to eject, didn't have any of those issues. It just ran like a top, and it was pretty darn accurate when I was shooting it slow, but shooting it fast, no. This is just not the gun for me. But it doesn't mean it's not the gun for you. And possibly it's just because this is such a weird design. But you know, FN, I believe, has stopped importing these to the US because they were just not selling. And I think I honestly understand why. But I do give FN credit for thinking outside of the box on this one. I really think that maybe they could refine this a little bit more and make it even better. Who knows? Maybe one day they will. But right now, as it sits, the tactical version of the FS2000 from FN, only 2.5 stars on the Texas Gun Vault scale. So let me know what you think. Do you guys own one of these? Have you ever shot one of these? And do your experiences with it mirror mine? I would love to know. So tell me in the comments section below. So, as always, thanks for watching.